Thank you for joining us at Hope for today's message. We are a multicultural family church that is located in Varsity Lakes in the beautiful city of the Gold Coast. No matter what you're facing right now, where you're from, or what language you speak, we want to welcome you. We are a home away from home for people all over the world and in all walks of life. Our heart is to be the voice of hope in our community and a safe place for people to heal and experience their hope restored. We hope this message blesses you.
It's only 5 weeks today till Easter Sunday. It's getting close. I want to talk about that today because a couple of weeks ago it was Ash Wednesday, and that's not something that we think about very much here, but I was reminded of an Ash Wednesday 43 years ago in Adelaide. I was living in Adelaide at the time, and there was a very strong, hot northerly wind. It had been very, very dry, and there was a huge dust cloud that came through. I remember driving down the street. I could hardly see where I was driving because the visibility was just so poor, and the wind was strong, and leaves and branches and stuff were being blown across the road. I don't have any personal photos from that time. I didn't have a smartphone in those days. And but I've just share with you some details about that ash. It was actually known as Ash Wednesday number 2 in South Australia because there was one 3 years before that on the same day. There's a series of bushfires that occurred in southeastern Australia, both in South Australia and Victoria. Within 12 hours, there's more than 180 different fires, winds of up to 110 kilometres an hour, and they were the deadliest in Australian history up until the Black Saturday in 2009. There were 75 people died, 47 in Victoria, 28 in South Australia. Up to 8,000 people were evacuated, more than 3,700 buildings got burnt down, and 2,545 individuals and families lost their homes. There's a huge volunteer workforce came out. 130,000 volunteers came out to fight the fires. Of those 75 people who died, there were 17 people who were volunteer firefighters who perished in those fires. Because there was just a firestorm that came through. People had nowhere to go. It's interesting, I remember listening to the radio. There's a guy called Murray Nicol who was an announcer on radio station 5DN in Adelaide, and he had a home up in the hills, and he reported live from outside the front of his home, and this is what he said: "At the moment, I'm watching my house burn down. I'm sitting out the road in front of my own house where I've lived for 13 or 14 years. It's going down in front of me, and the flames are on the roof, and it's just beyond belief. My own house. Everything around it's black. The fire's burning all around me. And the front section of my house is blazing. The roof's fallen in. My water tanks are useless. Absolutely nothing I can do about it." People had these petrol-powered pumps to pump water, but because of the intense heat, the petrol evaporated, so they were useless. And then if that didn't happen, there were sparks and stuff would burn holes in the hoses, so it didn't work. So the warning systems are pretty hopeless back in those days too. But Ash Wednesday is not named after those fires. Those fires happened on what was already known as Ash Wednesday. And after a fire, as you know, all that's left is ash. It's an important day in the church calendar, Ash Wednesday. It's not something that we celebrate in our sort of churches, but in traditional churches it's a big deal because it marks the beginning of Lent, which is the period leading up to Easter. And it's often in some of those traditional churches, it's a day of prayer and fasting in Catholic, Lutheran, Anglican and Methodist and Presbyterian, some of those sorts of churches. In some churches, people receive ashes on their forehead, either tipped on their head or the sign of a cross. They actually use some ashes for that. And traditionally, during that period of Lent, Christians would give themselves to prayer, to fasting and giving to the poor. And sometimes, in some churches, it was a time of preparation for baptism, because traditionally, baptisms certainly in the early days of the church, baptisms would occur around the time of Easter. And it's significant because baptism represents us dying to our old life and rising to a new life, which reflects Jesus dying and rising again. It's interesting, Ash Wednesday is not mentioned in the Bible. Lent is not mentioned in the Bible. Easter's not mentioned in the Bible. But they are things that we're familiar with, and the events around that and the reasons why they're there have very much got a biblical basis. Because Easter and the events of Easter, Jesus' death and resurrection, are the reason that he came. And because he rose from the dead, he's wanting to continue that work that he started in our world with us. He's wanting to do the same things in our lives that he did in the lives of his disciples back then in the first century. And today I want to look at Mark's Gospel. We're going to go through the whole of Mark's Gospel, all 16 chapters. No, not quite. But we will have a bit of an overview and then focus particularly on the second half of the Gospel of Mark. So the beginning of Mark's Gospel is in Mark chapter 1. After John was put in prison, Jesus went into Galilee proclaiming the good news of God. The time has come, he said. The kingdom of God has come near. Repent and believe the good news. So Jesus burst on the scene after John the Baptist and went around doing a whole lot of things. And we read in the first few chapters of Mark's Gospel, we see how Jesus called his disciples, how he healed lots of different people, lepers, blind people, lame people, people who are possessed with evil spirits. He taught his disciples, and he talked to the crowd in parables about the kingdom of God and what it was like and what God really wanted from people. He performed a number of miracles. He calmed the storm. He raised the dead. He fed crowds of people, 5,000 on one occasion, 4,000 on another. He walked on water. All sorts of amazing things. And we read about that in those chapters of Mark. Most of the time in the first part of Mark's Gospel, Jesus is in the north part of Israel. And you'll notice, I was reflecting on that even as I was reading through the Gospel myself, preparing for this, how many times there are geographical notes that are mentioned of where Jesus was and what he did. And you notice that he's up in the north, near Caesarea Philippi, which is right in the very top. It was a capital city of the area. In Capernaum, in Galilee, Nazareth, his own hometown. He's wandering around in all the villages and the towns in that area. Now we get into the middle of Mark's Gospel and we find that he's up in Caesarea Philippi. And that's the next slide, I believe. There we go, that's in Caesarea Philippi. And up there's a pagan shrine to the god Pan. And that big cave that you can see there. In the old days, before earthquakes and things happened subsequent, a whole lot of water would rush out from that big cave. And that was they built a temple around there to the god Pan, the goat god. There's also a major temple that was built to the Roman Emperor Augustus, and that whole area in previous times had been a major centre for the worship of Baal, the god who's mentioned often in the Old Testament. So it's a major pagan worship centre. So Jesus and his disciples went to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. He asked them, "Who do people say that I am?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter answered, "You are the Messiah." Yeah. And then Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. Amazing revelation. Peter had this revelation from God that Jesus was the Christ, the Messiah. Christ is the Greek word, Christos. Messiah is the Hebrew word, Messias. And they both mean the anointed one, the Son of God. Matthew records more of this conversation where Jesus says, on this rock I'm going to build my church, and the gates of hell will not be able to withstand its progress. But then Jesus tells them to be quiet. Why would he do that? Amazing revelation of who he is. He's been doing all these miracles and teaching and stuff in the period leading up to this, and now he wants them to be quiet? He wants them to be quiet because they have no idea what being a Messiah really is. They've got a concept of it, and the major Jewish concept at the time was, because the people of Israel had been under foreign domination for so long, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and now the Romans, they were looking for a king like David. Back to the glory days. Let's relive the glory days of the past. Let's have a Messiah who can throw out all these ungodly people, and we can be God's holy people again in our own right. But Jesus tells them to be quiet. Because Jesus was not going to be the Messiah that they expected. He wasn't going to be an all-conquering king. And then straight after that passage, Jesus starts to explain why they need to be quiet, because they need to learn some things. And they're actually, in Mark's Gospel, there's 3 times where Jesus predicts his death, and there's immediately following that, there are 3 lessons that the disciples had to learn, and that's what I'm going to focus on for the next little while. So Jesus then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law. He must be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. And Jesus turned and looked at Peter, his disciples. He rebuked Peter. "Get behind me, Satan," he said. "You don't have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Because Peter is almost repeating the temptations that Jesus endured in the wilderness before he started his ministry. Turn these stones into bread, look after yourself, put on a show, demonstrate how good you are. That was the temptations that Satan gave to Jesus. Take the easy way. Take the way of the world. The shortcut. The way of self-preservation. But Jesus wasn't going to do that, and that's why he rebuked Peter. So immediately after this, Jesus then calls the crowd to him along with his disciples, and this is what he says: "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it." What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. Jesus is calling them to deny themselves, take up their cross and follow him. And he never calls us to do or to face anything that he's not prepared to do or face himself. Denying yourself. Denying yourself is not just following your diet. Okay? Denying yourself is not just giving up a few little things. It's having a different focus of attention on why do we do the things that we do. Taking up your cross. Somebody who takes up their cross doesn't have plans for tomorrow. There's a focus. There's one direction of going. And for those first disciples that Jesus was talking to, they literally had to take up their crosses. Most of them were martyred. They were killed because of their faith. And even today, there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Christians actually who are being martyred for their faith. You don't have to look at Nigeria as one prime example. It's actually horrific what's going on around the world. Of people who are not prepared to deny their faith. They want to stay true to Jesus in the face of severe opposition. But what does that mean for you and me? What does it mean for us to deny ourselves and take up our cross? It certainly means having the discipline to spend some time with God each day, of opening the pages of the Bible, of bringing before him our cares and concerns in prayer and worshipping him. Denying ourselves means having the courage not to retaliate when somebody provokes you. Denying yourself means, as Elaine has just mentioned, spending our money on the things which are most important and giving. Maybe not spending money on some luxuries so that we can be of benefit to other people. Not waiting until we have barely enough for our own needs. So the lesson that Jesus is teaching his disciples in this one is that if you lose your life for Jesus and the gospel, you will find that you are more alive than you can possibly imagine. When we let go, we find that God replaces that with a sense of joy and peace that is absolutely amazing. And most of us here have experienced that, haven't we? When we give our lives to Jesus with just a whole burden lifts off our shoulders. The weight of the world is taken away because we know that we're right with God and with the people around about us. And it's such a relief. The second time Jesus predicts his death is in chapter 9. So they left that place and passed through Galilee. Jesus did not want anyone to know where they were because he was teaching his disciples. He said to them, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise. But they didn't understand what he meant, and they were afraid to ask him about it. So Peter's confession was up in the north in Caesarea Philippi. Now they've travelled south just to the west of the Sea of Galilee, somewhere near the town of Capernaum. And Jesus says the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. So the Son of Man is like us, but he's different to us. He's radically different to us. And the disciples didn't understand because they had no concept. They weren't able to compute the two ideas of Jesus being the Messiah and also suffering and dying. That was a whole new concept. That's probably one of the reasons why it took them so long to get it. Because we would love to have a Messiah who comes in like a knight in shining armour on a white horse and sorts everything out and drags us along with him. Fantastic. But when he dies and suffers, we don't want to be part of that. It's not real pleasant, is it? And the next slide will show you that's actually the synagogue in Capernaum. We had the privilege of being over there in Israel. How long ago was it? 6 years, 7 years ago? Something like that. And we went to some of these places. Absolutely amazing to see. These are the places where Jesus was, where he did these things. We serve a God who's actually grounded. It's not just a cleverly devised myth or something that people made up. There's a basis behind it. So Jesus says that the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men and he's going to die. So then the next lesson comes after that. They came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, what were you arguing about on the road? Because Jesus heard them arguing, these disciples. They kept quiet because on the way they'd argued about who was the greatest. Jesus sat down and he called the 12 and said, anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all. He took a little child he placed on them. Taking the child in his arms, he said to them, whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. Now, these disciples, I reckon, were quite an animated bunch of guys. They were fishermen, probably tough, probably used to telling tall stories about the one that got away. And they were arguing. Fishermen are known to exaggerate. And these guys are arguing about who is the greatest. And then Jesus pinged them. He knew what they were doing. And when he said, what were you arguing about? They just, oops, sprung. I guess they were just embarrassed, weren't they? Because Jesus saw what was really going on. Everybody wants to be first. You want to be first. Pick me. Yeah, I want the best place. I want the best stuff. And that's not a bad desire, but the lesson here is, instead of looking out for yourself, look out for the little insignificant person and serve their needs. That's just why Jesus took a little children were not considered of much value at all in those days. They were pesky creatures who, when they become adults, you might treat them with a bit of respect, but in the meantime, actually in the Roman world, children were just considered as possessions. Which is a lot of infanticide. If you didn't want a baby girl, you just killed it. And unfortunately, we're seeing a bit of a reversion to that sort of thinking in our society today, aren't we? But when you welcome a little child, when you welcome a person who is insignificant, you're actually welcoming Jesus. And that's why, as a Christian church over the centuries, has always looked out for the people who are considered least in the rest of society. That's why the Christian churches start up hospitals and hospices and care homes and all sorts of stuff like that. Because we see the need to treat people as those who contain the image of God, which is what every human being is. The third time Jesus predicts his death is in chapter 10, Mark chapter 10. They were on their way up to Jerusalem with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. Again, he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen to him. We are going up to Jerusalem, he said, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. Here is Jesus out in front of his disciples. They're following the road down up from Caesarea Philippi, through Capernaum, then past the Sea of Galilee, following down alongside the Jordan River Valley, getting down towards Jericho. And once you get to Jericho, then you have to go up the hill towards Jerusalem. But here's Jesus out in front of the disciples. There's a crowd. The disciples are astonished, and the other people who are following him are afraid. At this time, there's increasing opposition to Jesus from the Jewish authorities, the scribes and the Pharisees and other people. He had crowds, when he was up in Galilee and north, there's lots of people were rejoicing and they had a wonderful time. And while Jesus is still doing the things that he always did, while he's still teaching, while he's still healing, while he's still just looking after people, there's also this increasing level of opposition. And they know that if he goes to Jerusalem, that's all going to come to a head. The disciples are astonished and amazed, and everybody else is afraid. They know it's not going to end well. But Jesus is the leader, and he's out the front. And sometimes when you're a leader and you're out the front, it can be a little bit lonely. And not only that, Jesus is fully aware of what awaits him, and he's displaying incredible courage in doing that. And you'll notice with those 3 predictions of his death, he outlines a whole bunch of different things. He's going to be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. He's going to be sentenced to death. He's going to be delivered to the Romans, the Gentiles. He's going to be mocked and spit upon, flogged. He's going to be executed, and he's going to rise again. But the disciples still didn't get it. In the next few verses it says this, and this is the 3rd lesson. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. What do you want me to do for you, he said. They replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory. They had an inkling that it was going to all end well for Jesus, and they wanted to be part of it. And they wanted the ringside seats. They wanted to be in the box seat. You don't know what you're asking, Jesus said. Can you drink the cup that I drink or be baptised with the baptism I'm being baptised with? We can, they answered. Jesus said, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptised with the baptism I'm baptised with. But to sit at my right or on my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. When the other 10 disciples heard this, they became indignant with James and John. Who do you think you are? Jesus called them all together and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be the slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. These disciples, they never seem to get it, do they? And you know what? We're no different. As hard as it might be to admit it, we're pretty thick sometimes, and sometimes God has to teach us the same lesson repeatedly. And sometimes we think we've learned it, and then we revert back, and we're back around it again. Because to find life, you need to lose it. Find your life, you need to lose it. And if you're so focused on your own thing, people, as I said, people who are wrapped up in themselves make a very small package. What's the other one? He's a self-made man and he worships his creator. But instead of looking out for yourself, we need to look out for the people around about us, and particularly those who can't look out for their own selves. And if you've ever been in a position where you've been a little person, where you've been on the fringes, how good is it when somebody recognises you and welcomes you and draws you into the circle? That is it's a wonderful thing. It lifts you, doesn't it, when that happens? And I'm sure most of us have experienced that at some time in our lives. And it behoves us to do the same thing to the people around about us. James and John wanted a place of honour. But nobody is honoured for what they receive. People are only honoured for what they give. We have Australia Day honours, don't we? We have Australia Day honours and Queen's Birthday honours, or King's Birthday honours. Who's recognised in those honours lists? People who have given their lifetime of service to various parts of society. People are honoured because they've given of themselves, and that honour and that giving has been recognised. That's where honour comes from. So Jesus himself came as a servant. It says in Philippians, Jesus did not consider equality with himself, with God, something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant. Being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow and every tongue in heaven and on earth, and every tongue can acknowledge that Jesus is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Because Jesus humbled himself, God the Father exalted him. So in this season leading up to Easter, as we look at what Jesus has faced and endured for us, I think it's up to us to respond in faith, trusting that we can learn the lessons that Jesus taught his disciples and not have to repeat the lesson ourselves. So I'm encouraging you today in your response to Jesus, as you give yourself to him afresh, to deny yourself, take up your cross, whatever that means for you in your particular situation. To welcome the little ones, the insignificant people, to reach out and to be a servant. And I know many of us have learned that lesson, and I don't know everybody here by a long way, but those of you who do know, there's so many of us here who do have a servant heart, who want to serve. And we've got a wonderful team of people out there getting lunch ready for us now, and they are servants as well. Yeah. So be a servant.
We hope that you've enjoyed today's message. If you'd like to find out more information about Hope, go to hopechurchaustralia.com.